Welcome to Finnish black metal time with some vinyl reissue. Here it is with Thyrane's originally recorded as demo release, Black Harmony. Technically speaking, this really could have been a debut album by the very band already back in the 90s, but demos are what they are. We'll take a look at that after this quick unsleeving. There is no box, so I'd call it unboxing. So let's take a look at this vinyl reissue. The original one, if I am not mistaken, was as late as 2017, which is quite something when you consider that this came already in the late 90s. Here it is, almost 40 minutes of music through 4 tracks. This is, by the way, the original CD press letter. As you can see, it mentions CD. But yeah, vinyl it is. I was asking the label and it was like, yeah, it's the original one. I mean, might be newer print, but as you can see, the things have not been corrected. So, pretty basic, standard, quite sturdy black vinyl. And then, of course, the classic cover, which has gone unchanged throughout the years. What you have here is inverted cross, spikes and studs, heavy metal gesture, Black Harmony. This is kind of an iconic photo in a way, reminding me of very many of those Norwegian black metal photos back in the days, but not as cool as a cover, I think. On the other side, you will see the lineup back then, corpse paint studs, all that stuff. Total blasphemy, 35 minutes and then some seconds. And then you have this lyric sheet here, which is, once again, acting as a sleeve as well. You have the lyrics, you have the band people here. So this was the lineup back in the days. 4 guys, which points us towards Blastmore, the head of the band. But as often forgotten, one of the earliest black metal bands to come from Finland, Thyrane come from a city known as Kemi, a smaller city close to Swedish border. Never been that much of a big city in terms of music and all, I mean black metal especially. But, you know, they made their way on the map on the Finnish black metal scene back in the days, being very, very good demo back in 1997 called Black Harmony. Now, they did this demo in the Tico Tico Studios, which was already known for the works of Imbel Nazarene back in the days. Even us with Nightside went there to record our first demo in 1997. For us, it was more like a few hundred kilometers, about 10 hours of driving versus these guys operating in their own city. But I mean, it was legendary already back in the late 90s, so it made lots of sense to go there to really get that strong, good production, which would be very fitting for this kind of music, which is here labeled as symphonic black metal. Now, pointed here as early and later, this is very much the story with this band. But I've already mentioned this in my respective Finnish original black metal series video, where I go through the whole career and the difference between albums and all that stuff. So now we're gonna focus on Black Harmony. So originally released on tape back in 1997, and once again 4 tracks through 35 minutes, meaning the songs are quite lengthy. Here is the list of other versions, and as you can see, 2017 was the first time on vinyl, but it was released on CD already back in late 90s. And for a reason, the musical writing here is very good, as well as the production. And unlike so many demos from the 90s, which sounded like they were done in a rehearsal room, not with good production, good sound or whatever, and everything was like, yeah, typical rehearsal room take. This was like, wow, you are doing an album quality stuff with 4 tracks and just putting it on tape. So it was well deserved that it got CD version already back then. And as you can pretty much guess, LPs or vinyl in general were not exactly, trendy thing to do back in the 90s or early 2000s. And that's probably the reason why it took so many years, 20 years basically, to get this one on vinyl for the first time in 2017. So back in the days, limited edition, reissue, 3 colors and all. And now in 2025, 8 years later, or more like 8.5 years later, we have this new version out, the one I just showed you, but it's not even listed here because it's still coming out. Lineup was indeed, much like I showed you, 4 pieces of a band where Blastmore taking care of vocals and drums, and in fact he's the main man of the band in so many ways. Lineups have changed since those days. But what is interesting in terms of music is that this first demo already showcased a very, very ready band, and what I really mean is that it wasn't like, those very steps by a band in their like baby era, but this Black Harmony was ready to do that symphonic metal with kind of combining elements of early Emperor, I'm talking in the Nightside Eclipse era mostly, to whatever Immortal was doing back in the days. So more aggressive cousin to Emperor in a way, and having those Immortal things going through. However, this was obviously more symphonic in nature than Immortal, meaning lots of keyboards creating these atmospheric parts and fast tempo, those kind of spoken parts where you have this kind of a modded voice, very deep and very dramatic and all that stuff, how it goes. And there are lots of pointers which kind of take us to the 90s, being a product of its time. But still, almost 30 years later, it's very, very nice when you're listening to this because this feels so timeless. First of all, like I said, the production is very, very good, and it's something that could still come out these days and nobody would say this feels dated. And when it comes to songwriting, I feel like the only problem, if you can really call it that even, is that the songs tend to be on the lengthier side of things. Meaning that, do you really need 11 minutes of a song that goes sprawling through different places where you could just have 2 songs instead? So what is not working so well, and yet it's working still more than well enough, is that, those songs could have been more compact, telling the story in maybe half the time, or at least 1/3 shorter. But that's not really a problem when you have this good quality symphonic black metal, which has perfect balance between keyboards as well as guitar parts and blasting drums, a lot of fierce energy and all that stuff. And it gets this nice, dark, classic second wave black metal mood, the whole atmosphere, which is built upon the guitars as well as keyboards. And when it comes to the vocals, they're very, very fitting for the genre. They're not like really outstanding as something like, wow, this is unusual or whatever, but more like the kind of a default setting, which is more than good enough for this kind of music. So for me, Thyrane is somewhere, quality-wise, between Anthems and In the Nightside Eclipse when it comes to an album. I think this is, on an album, way better than Anthems overall, but it's not able to really challenge In the Nightside Eclipse. Then again, I really don't know any album from the symphonic black metal genre which is able to do that, because in my opinion it's the best of the pile when it comes to that particular subgenre. Black Harmony is often overlooked as an album because it's just one of those smaller bands, forgotten bands. I will say forgotten because they really made a comeback later on. It doesn't really show here because their era was lasting less than 10 years. But they did make comeback after 2015 and even played some shows, like for example at Steelfest, Steel Chaos and so forth in Finland. But past for a few years, they haven't been doing anything. So the activity level is very much a question mark. Will they ever do a new album? Because it would have been very much more like welcome after their latest album from 2005, which was like getting back to their roots. So their era might have been short and fierce and lots of changes, but what they started with, the Black Harmony one, is in my opinion their best release so far and totally worth getting on vinyl or CD. Really good stuff. I would even go as far as to say it's one of the best black metal demos of all time, no matter which era we're talking about, which country we're talking about, and so forth. So definitely something that you might have missed and for a good reason back in the days, especially if you're younger generation, but no reason to do it anymore. You can find it on streaming services, but if you really like it, I strongly recommend getting a physical copy, because as you know, you never know how the streaming things can be in the future with all the AI music coming into play and all that stuff. So get it while it's out there. Should be out by this time the video gets out. So enjoy some symphonic black metal from Finland. Can't get much better than that in the given genre. Off you go. Bye.